Hello everyone, welcome to another video talking geeky stuff. Today is another video about Filmmaker, John Woo, one of my favorite all-time action directors that I grew up with, especially in Hong Kong. So with John Woo, he's famous for his, if you've seen his films, you know what I'm talking about. He's famous for his two guns, slow motion, long jacket, glasses, very stylized killing people, if you know what I mean. But anyway, John Woo. So let's go back in time to the mid 80s when I first really noticed his style of action was way different than his other Hong Kong cinema at that time. During that, mid 80s, late 80s, there was a lot of kind of action films, but you can see a budget problem and so on. Not saying that John Woo had amazing budget, but compared to his other contemporaries, yeah, he had a little bit more budget. But I think the most important thing is John Woo's films was his detail. Because being in the UK, also exposed to a lot of Western films, and of course the 80s had some amazing action films as well. So you can't help but compare the two. So some of the other action films in the mid to late 80s in the Hong Kong cinema time didn't really compare. You can tell it's night and day with budgets and so on. But with John Woo one, he's like, when I first saw a John Woo film, the first one was A Better Tomorrow. I was noticing, I was like, okay. I noticed the action scenes are a little different because of the slow motion, the stylized, the way that Chan in fact walks into the restaurant. And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, he puts the handguns in the flower pots, plant pots, and he walks in there with two hands and just shooting up the place. And also the way he portrays the power of the guns. There's so many Hong Kong cinema films in the 80s where he shoots maybe a glass door but nothing happens. It's just like a spark, lack of budget. But this one, you can see that John will really focus on the details. When a gun shoots, it damages not just the person but the surroundings, and that caught my attention because I was like, oh, this is cool, because I was so used to Hollywood having the better action sequences in kind of like explosion guns. I mean, Hong Kong cinema had a better action sequences in like sword fighting, hand-to-hand combat, with Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung in the Golden Harvest productions. They were much better with the hand-to-hand combat. But when it comes down to guns, explosions, set pieces, the Americans were by far ahead. And even to this day, they're still way ahead because of the experience and the budgets. But anyway, going back to that, The Better Tomorrow, 1986, starring three of my favorite actors at that time, Chan Fat, Leslie Chan, bless his soul, the guy died a few years ago, and Dick Long. Kind of like sort of undercover triad gangster kind of film. But the most important thing, the message I find with John Woo films was the brotherhood, the loyalty between friends and brothers. Because one thing about the American action films I always found a bit that I couldn't connect to was how there wasn't that kind of brotherhood, the relationship, the friends, that bond that they have that, in a lot of Asian films that time and even to this day has that kind of brotherhood loyalty. Because in Hong Kong or in Chinese culture, when we call friends, we call each other Hing Day. Direct translation means brother. But if you see two Chinese guys or Asian guys and you might hear the word Hing Day, 9 out of 10 times they're probably referring to each other as friends, not blood brothers. Because it's become such a term that we've been using for so many years now that it's kind of changed our language. So we don't call each other friends. Well, we do, but the really good friends, like, grow up together, fighting together, kind of stuff like that, we call each other Hing Day. So when you hear the word Hing Day, 9 out of 10 times you're referring to as a friend. So with that in mind, his films really resonate with the audience because that's how our Asian culture is. We treat friends as brothers, and the loyalty. A lot of our Asian people we live and die on loyalty. You go back to our history in that way. So that's why we can really relate to that. But at the same time, that aside, his films are really stylish as well. I mean, they make you look cool. I suppose in one thing we have this kind of longing or belonging, or hear me out. It's like you go to Hong Kong, you go to China, the major cities, even South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, places like that. Yeah, it's a very safe place. You the crime rates are so low. You can walk out with cash. You can go out during midnight with just your pajamas and go into a 7-Eleven. Nothing happens to you. And we all know we're very kind of like loyal citizens, so to speak. We follow the rules and so on. And I think watching his films with that brotherhood, the stylized, the bad boy, the kind of rebellious character, it kind of makes us want to be like that, but we don't do that in real life. So it's more like a fantasy. So that's kind of one of the things why we like his movies, and not only just the audience, but other filmmakers kind of latched on to that kind of thinking. So a lot of films in the late 80s, early 90s to mid 90s to the late 90s kind of had that theme: brotherhood, bad boys, rebellious, and so on. And here's some of the films that are top my list, as you can probably see. 5 out of 6 of them starring Chow Fat. Bullet in the Head was, if I remember correctly, was originally supposed to be his story for A Better Tomorrow 3, because the first 2 was produced by Chisui Hawk, and them 2 have been long-time friends, until that time where they had a disagreement, and Chisui Hawk went on to make A Better Tomorrow 3 himself, and John Woo kind of rewrote the script and made it into Bullet in the Head. And you can watch Bullet in the Head and A Better Tomorrow 3. Had a lot of similar kind of themes surrounding it. And of course you got The Killer, which is, to me, one of the best kind of assassin films of all time. The action sequences, I mean, what I mentioned earlier, the respect, the loyalty amongst a cop and a killer. And the ending scene in the church, it's fantastic. And then Hard-Boiled, I think Hard-Boiled is out of all these films here, probably the most action-packed, especially the last half hour, last 40 minutes, half hour in the hospital. Just blows your mind. Violent. There was a lot of scenes I had to cut out. And I think that's what kind of shot John Woo and Chow Fat into the international market. A lot of Hollywood kind of producers started to take notice. On the topic of Hollywood, back in the early 90s after Hard-Boiled, like I said, he got wooed, pun intended, wooed towards Hollywood, and he made his first film with Van Damme, Hard Target. And I thought that was a good choice. It started off kind of not B-movie, not A-list movie, kind of in between. Because Van Damme was quite well known. He wasn't, say, on the level as Stallone or Schwarzenegger at that time. But Van Damme was a pretty known character, and he was a low budget, and so yeah, he made Hard Target, and I think that's my personal favorite Van Damme movie, because it's a kind of different side to a Van Damme movie, because a lot of Van Damme movies he uses a lot of martial arts, kicks and so on. Don't get me wrong, he uses martial arts in this, but a lot of guns, and the film went through hell. A lot of edits had to be made because it was too violent. And then he had his success. Wasn't an amazing success, but he had his success and moved on to The Broken Arrow, which I thought was fun. Wasn't amazing. And then he moved on to what I think was his best Hollywood film, Face Off. John Travolta, Nicolas Cage, and both interviews with both the actors, they said that they loved working on that, and they really, John Woo allowed them to really kind of let them play with the characters. And there's a couple of scenes from that got cut out as well. And to me, that's my personal favorite John Woo action film that he did in Hollywood. And then he went on to do Mission Impossible 2. Stylized, really good stylized, very, what do you call it, slow motion. Made Tom Cruise look pretty cool. It was okay. It was, when I first watched it, I thought, wow, this is fantastic. And then as time went along, you realise it was okay, you know, it wasn't the best. I think it's probably the second worst Mission Impossible film. I think the worst one was Mission Impossible 3, but it's still good. I mean, all the Mission Impossible films are amazing, and being the worst one is not a bad thing because that is still a good movie in general. Not only that, John Williams, of course, he's known for his modern day action films, but you know, back in the 70s and late 60s, he did a lot of period dramas, kung fu films, and he kind of went back to it with Red Cliff, based on the famous story in during the Three Kingdom time. If you ever played Dynasty Warriors, you know what I'm talking about. So Red Cliff is based on a true story to some extent. Certain things got exaggerated because this is followed closely to the novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and Romance of the Three Kingdoms is more based on a true story, but of course he adds certain things that is fictionalized to make it more dramatic. But if I was to recommend watching Red Cliff, when it came out in the UK, there was two type of versions. There's one that was, because the film was about 5 hours long, if you combine them. So John Woo cut them as two films, and he released them separately. But there was later on there was a re-release, and what happened was in the West they cut it together into one movie. So be careful of that. Definitely watch the two movies, you know, over 5 hours. You get the understanding of the story and the amazing photography, the history behind it, the colors, the costumes, and the amount of people he used. Apparently, he used about 1 million extras in that, and there was a few trouble. I think during the filming, one of the stunt double died, so that's why the film kind of got delayed. And there's another film I really was really kind of under the radar was Reign of Assassins. That was just co-directed by John Woo. He only directed like 60% of that. I can't remember who directed it, but I really liked it. Michelle Yeoh was really good. The martial art is really good. Kind of reminds me of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but without Chow Fat. That is a really good that sword kind of wushu kind of film. Definitely check it. It's got pretty decent story behind it. So anyway, check those movies out. And thank you for watching this movie. I was going to watch this movie. Anyway, I'm saying thanks for watching this, and please like, subscribe, and till next time. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are, and please stay safe. Goodbye.